You're sitting with something that's gone wrong. Nothing huge. A bill you can't quite cover, a decision you've been circling for weeks, a silence in a relationship that's starting to feel permanent. And for a second, your mind does the thing it's always done. It reaches for someone, a parent, a partner, someone older, steadier, who will look at this and know exactly what to do, and just take it from you. You almost pick up the phone. Then you stop, because somewhere underneath the reaching, you already know. There's no one on the other end of that call who's going to fix this. There never really was. This isn't about logistics. You already know no one's coming to do your taxes or fix your career or solve your relationship for you. That part isn't news. What's harder to admit is the other thing. Somewhere in you, a hope has been running this whole time. Not the hope that someone will handle your life. The hope that someone will finally know it. Know you. Fully, without the exhausting work of explaining yourself, defending yourself, performing your needs clearly enough to be heard. A hope that someone is coming who won't need you to ask. That's the part that's actually breaking when you realize no one's coming. Not your independence, not your ability to cope. The fantasy that you would eventually be rescued from the loneliness of being the only one who fully carries your own life. Psychoanalysts have a name for this hope. They call it a rescue fantasy. Not a fantasy in the dramatic sense. No one's imagining a literal hero. It's quieter than that. It shows up sideways, in waiting for the partner who'll finally just get you. The mentor who sees your potential before you have to prove it. The moment someone notices, unprompted, exactly how hard you've been trying, and finally makes it easier. The psychoanalyst Melanie Klein offers a useful way to understand where this comes from. Early in life, Klein argued, the mind operates from what she called the paranoid schizoid position, a state where care is expected to be total. The caregiver either meets every need perfectly or fails completely. There's no in-between, because the infant mind isn't yet capable of holding one. Healthy development means moving toward what Klein called the depressive position, a harder, more mature place. Here, the mind learns something painful. The people we depend on are separate from us. They have their own limits, their own lives, their own blind spots. They can love us and still fail to fully know us, both at once. This isn't a milestone you pass once in childhood and never revisit. Klein was clear that the mind moves back and forth between these positions across an entire life, which means the longing for a perfect, all-meeting rescuer doesn't disappear in adulthood. It just changes shape into the right partner, the right therapist, the right friend who will finally be the one who gets it without being told. The day you realize no one is coming isn't really a single day. It's the depressive position, arriving again, asking you one more time to let the fantasy go. Here's the part that's easy to misread. It would be simple to conclude from all this that needing other people is the problem, that the fantasy proves you should expect less, lean on people less, keep your needs to yourself so they can't go unmet again. But that's not quite what's breaking. You're not wrong to need to be known. You're not wrong to want someone to notice the weight you're carrying. That need is real, and it doesn't go away just because the fantasy version of it does. What's dying isn't the need. It's the shape you expected the need to be met in. Total, intuitive, unprompted. The idea that real care doesn't require you to ask plainly, to explain yourself, to risk being specific about what you need, and possibly being told no. That version of being understood, wordlessly, automatically, without the vulnerability of asking, was never something other people were capable of giving. Not because they don't love you, because no one can fully know another person without being told. Even the people who love you best are, in the end, separate minds, guessing. The grief, then, isn't grief for connection. It's grief for a very old, very young hope that you would someday be spared the exposure of asking. That hope is what doesn't survive the realization. What might survive it is something else entirely. So once the fantasy is gone, what's left is a version of being met that doesn't depend on being rescued. People who show up, not because they intuited exactly what you needed, but because you told them, plainly, and they came anyway. Help that exists because you asked for it, not in spite of having to. It's a smaller kind of care than the one you were hoping for. It requires you to be visible in a way the fantasy never did, to say the actual words, to risk the actual no, to be known through disclosure instead of magic. It doesn't feel as good, at first, as being rescued would have. There's no one arriving to confirm that you were worth knowing all along, without having to show them. But it's the only kind of care that was ever real to begin with.
You know, you should watch this video next. I think you will like it.